Too many people hate international football. Now, if you're an English fan, then you're excused. A person can only take so much Southgate ball. But for everyone else, the international stage should be something to look forward to. Now, I've talked about what makes this sport so great in previous videos, from underdogs, from unpredictability, moments of complete genius to utter bizarreness. In fact, back in February, I made a video detailing the AFCON tournament because it was pure mayhem. From the Ivory Coast sacking their manager in the middle of the competition, then winning the whole thing anyway. England, just putting it out there, maybe it's an option for you, just saying. To memeable moments in virtually every single match that was played. All of those things I mentioned before can be encapsulated into one single word: chaos. And regardless of what international competition is playing, they all have that element of chaos. Maybe not as much as AFCON, but still. Now, if you prefer club football over international football, that's okay. That's your opinion, and I can understand why. What I don't understand are the people that hate international football, and I want to know why. Why do people hate this aspect of the sport when it's clear it has so many of the features that make us love it in the first place? So let's talk about it. Let's go through some of the reasons why people hate international football and try to dispel those reasons. The first reason I usually see is that international football's quality is not as good as club football. So the first thing I want to say is that in general, I actually do agree with this. Club football's quality is typically better because the top clubs in the world are getting the best players in the world. Obviously, some countries will produce more talent more consistently, but it doesn't matter if a wonder kid pops up in Indonesia, he could still go on to play for a big club. For international football, however, you could have someone like Jan Oblak, who has been the main keeper for one of the better clubs in the world for nearly a decade, with 3 defenders in front of him playing in Slovenia, Poland, and Russia, the last of which now playing in the second tier after being relegated with the second worst defense in the league. My point with this is that countries cannot pick players to play for them, which will result in players like Gabriel Jesus or Jack Grealish being left home, players like these guys, don't mean to be disrespectful, they're obviously better than me, playing in a major international tournament with double-digit caps, and the overall quality of play being slightly worse. However, my argument against that comes in 2 parts. One being that the drop in quality isn't really that dramatic, and 2, that small drop in quality that actually is there is actually a good thing, and I know that sounds crazy, but just let me explain. So like I said, I don't think that the quality is that much lower. I did agree earlier that club football in general is indeed a little better, and I explained how that happens, but that doesn't mean it's a night and day difference. After all, these are professional players. To quote Brian Scalabrine, a notorious bench player from the NBA and the owner of the nickname The White Mamba, "I'm closer to LeBron than you are to me." And that can be easily translated into football terms, as the striker for Slovenia and Panathinaikos is closer to Mbappe than we are to him. Again, these are professional players, and they are still capable of producing amazing moments. I mean, have you seen some of the goals being scored at the Euros? The amount of absolute piss missiles has been off the charts, and you still have very technical goals like Fabian Ruiz slaloming his way through the Croatian defense. I'm aware that some of the quality is indeed lower. That's why own goal is leading the scoring at the Euros. But that brings me into my second point, that small drop in quality that is there is actually a good thing. The reason why I say this is because that small drop is usually seen more prominently in the better and highly favored countries. Therefore, the playing field is more level, upsets are more likely to happen, and the whole thing will be more entertaining. Someone like Jude Bellingham could have one of the best seasons in the world for Real Madrid. Vinicius Jr. can perform equally as good for the same team, but internationally, they could not be further from their club form, and we see powerhouses like England and Brazil draw against Slovenia and Costa Rica. Obviously, there are other reasons why players may not perform as well, whether it be the manager's tactics. Again, England, seriously, this is still on the table. The role they are playing in for their country, the quality of teammates around them, the cohesiveness with said teammates, or a combination of all of these things. That small drop in quality is, again, typically seen in the highly favored countries. And since the smaller countries might have better chemistry, Slovenia, for example, has 3 players on the same club, we see more underdogs, more upsets, and more chaos. That also means the best players sometimes have to carry their country by themselves because of a lack of cohesion, leading to long-range goals, mesmerizing dribbles, or a hat trick in the World Cup final. So that brings us nicely into the second reason as to why some people wrongly hate international football, and that's that they think that it's more boring than club football. Again, if you're an English fan, fair enough, I get it. Otherwise, I just reasoned how upsets can happen more frequently at the international level than the club level. Greece winning the 2004 Euros, Paraguay reaching the 2011 Copa America final without winning a single match, Morocco being the first African country to make the semifinals of a World Cup. How can anyone say that that's boring? How about 17 yellow cards and 2 red cards being brandished between Turkey and Czechia, some of them given out after the match completed? Come on now, that's just pure entertainment. Now, of course, some individual matches are indeed not worth watching. These groups made me question my international football agenda, but the same could be said about some club matches. Now, keep in mind, I'm not saying that club football isn't exciting. Of course, it has wonderful moments, like the Bundesliga from last season, being one of the most story-filled seasons that we've seen in recent memory. However, to say that club football is always more entertaining than international football is extremely disingenuous. The two best clubs in England, Manchester City and Arsenal, played some of the most boring matches in the entire season, and I say that as an Arsenal fan. The tactics that were employed in those two matches were very robotic, slow, conservative, defensive, which are the literal same reasons given as an argument against international football. How many of us, myself included, have complained about Pep Guardiola making the game more robotic? How many videos have come out saying that the game is becoming more boring? Now, with that said, a few tweets that I've seen have mentioned that it depends on what club or nation you watch that dictates whether or not the match will be fun, and I agree with that. San Marino versus England, for example, was not an exciting match, but neither was Arsenal versus Sheffield United, which makes sense because one team is obviously stronger than the other. France versus the Netherlands wasn't particularly exciting in the Euros, but as we mentioned earlier, neither was Arsenal versus Manchester City. I think it's up to the individual to know what matches could be entertaining and which ones could be very boring in either situation. And so for that reason, I'm saying that international football is just as entertaining or boring as club football, if you know where to look. Like the match between Georgia and Turkey that had the entire Twitter timeline going crazy. The passion we see from a lot of these countries is admirable, and what makes the sport so fun to watch, especially as a neutral. But I think that's the biggest difference between international football and club football, and where club football might actually have an advantage. It's not the difference in entertainment or an extreme difference in quality, but rather a difference in connection. Since these international competitions are less frequent, with the best countries competing in a major tournament every 2 years, the connection one feels towards the national team is usually less compared to their club. You're able to watch your favorite club compete every single season, with some of the better clubs playing more than 50 matches a year. When there's less opportunity to show your support, that said support will dwindle. But with that said, that's actually a huge reason why I love international football. The emotions are so strong because that window of opportunity, the time frame to win something, is much smaller. So with that said, I think a good statement to summarize would be that club football is typically better as a fan, while international football is typically better as a neutral. Like I said earlier, I don't mind when people say they prefer club football over international football. In fact, it makes complete sense. You can show your support more often and will therefore have a greater connection to the club and players. Trey's tweet about being connected to Spurs because of his dad is a perfect example of this. A really sad example, but perfect nonetheless. But as I said earlier for myself, I love the drama of the sport. I love the storylines. I love the strong emotions. I of course want Arsenal to win everything at the club level, but seeing a relegation side in Germany fight for a title is extremely special. Even though I have zero connection to the Gambia, learning about how they scored a 92nd minute penalty just to get into the AFCON qualifiers, then earning said qualification with 3 dramatic late goals in their last 3 matches, I mean, to me, that's what the sport is all about. And however you can get that feeling, whether it be from club football or international football, that is what's most important. happy?